Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, I have the start of a new FPL psychology series on my channel titled Inside the Mind. I'm basically going to be interviewing various FPL managers from a psychological perspective, delving into their psyche, creating a behavioral profile for them, and learning about what makes them tick and what makes them top managers. Every single episode will have a new manager on the series, so comment down below if there are any managers in particular that you would like to see me invite onto the channel. But today, we start with an absolutely brilliant guest, as you can probably see by the title and the thumbnail. If you're excited for the pre-season content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump into today's video. So guys, on the very first episode of Inside the Mind, we welcome one of the juggernauts of the FPL community, FPL mate Dan. Not only has Dan absolutely crushed the YouTube scene for the last 2 or 3 years, but he has also now won the Content Creators Mini League, finishing a ridiculous 243rd in the world and reaching, I believe, at one point 12th in the world, which is a crazy, crazy season. I'm sure not even Dan thought he would reach those levels. So I thought, what a perfect first guest. Not only a content creator, so he understands YouTube, but also someone that has had a season that most of us dream of having and that most of us probably won't ever have. So I thought it'd be really interesting to delve into his psyche, learn what makes him such an excellent FPL manager, and find out what made that rank so incredible, and hopefully improve our own decision making as a result. So welcome to the channel, Dan.
Hi, thank you for having me, Ross. I know you've been on my channel a couple of times recently. It's nice to be on yours now. So we're doing a bit back and forth. I'm loving it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you haven't watched any of the summer camp videos that Dan is doing on his channel, I've featured in 2 of those, and he's going to have some other really cool content creators on there as well. So 100% go check out those videos. Are you feeling a bit of pressure now, Dan? I've just said that you're this excellent manager. Are you feeling a bit of pressure about us delving into your psyche now?
I don't know. I feel like I was a casual FPL manager until very, very recently. So I kind of feel a little bit of pressure to try and maintain some kind of a good rank, but you know, I know for a fact that it's never going to be the same dizzy heights as the 2021-22 season. So not expecting that, but certainly want to go back to back, see if I can do back to back top 10k or something like that, maybe.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm sure you will. So today we're going to focus on 5 broad topics. So if you're watching this, you'll see it on your screen, the 5 topics that we're going to look at today. But the essential sort of overarching theme is we just want to understand what made the season so fantastic and understand what Dan does to improve his decision-making in FPL. And like I said, hopefully that will lead to us improving our decision-making as well. So apart from just the questions that I'll be asking Dan here, I have given Dan 4 questionnaires before this started. So I'm trying to get into Dan's head, try and work out what makes him tick. So he has filled in those 4 questionnaires for me, and we'll reveal the results. Dan doesn't know the results of those questionnaires yet, so we are going to reveal those live in the video. Dan, what's your experience with psychology like? Have you had a bit of a background in this? Is this going to be your first time discussing psychological elements?
Not exactly. I kind of have taken a casual interest in it, but you know, I'm certainly not even nearly as versed as you are, Ross. So I'm sure you'll be able to teach me a lot of things during this video, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. So if you're watching this and you don't know who I am a lecturer in psychology. So hopefully I'm the right person to introduce you to this, and hopefully after this it'll take a bit more of an interest in trying to basically fine-tune the psychological elements of your game. So without further ado, guys, we're going to jump into the first section, which is fear of missing out. So guys, like I said, the first section is going to be on fear of missing out, or FOMO. And this is a bit of a fan favorite in the FPL community. A lot of people throw this term around, but what does FOMO actually mean? So it's basically that pervasive apprehension or that anxiety that other people are having fun and other people are enjoying themselves. And it's almost at the expense of us. We're not part of that enjoyment. We're not part of that experience that they're having. So a good example in your everyday life would be something like your friends are going on holiday or your friends are going out, but you don't have the money, or you're revising for your exams and you're worried that they're going to have some incredible experiences and they're going to have all of these inside jokes, and you, unfortunately, are going to miss out on all of that. So it's almost like I said, that anxiety or fear that you're missing out on an enjoyable experiences that the masses are having. So you can imagine that applies very, very well to FPL, especially if you're on social media, which we will get into. It's almost like, say, for example, a player has been brought in by all of the FPL community, and you know that this player is going to be at 100% effective ownership by the end of the week, and you're stressing out because your plan wasn't to bring in this player. You don't have a free striker spot, for example, to bring this player in. Your plan was to roll a transfer and make 2 transfers next week, but you're starting to think, hang on a second, what if everyone else is right? What if everyone else is correct? And I'm going to not only look like a really, really poor manager, but also miss out on all of these points. And you start to second guess your decision making. And that right there is fear of missing out. So Dan, how much do you think, as an FPL manager and in particular a content creator as well, which is a good distinction to make, how do you think you're maybe influenced by sort of the FPL community consensus? Say you open up YouTube or you scroll through Twitter. Do you think you let them influence your decision making, or do you think you're very, very individual in what you do?
Honestly, I feel like, yeah, if I go on social media too much in a week and one player is being spoken about a lot, if I'd already at least considered that player, I'll go for them. But I have to say, sometimes I will, see a lot of people hyping up a player, and I will just kind of try and just, if I don't agree with it, I will just go all in the other way. So yes, I do think I deal with a little bit of FOMO when I already am kind of half on board with a certain player. But if it's a player I'd never agreed with in the first place, I'll just go full tilt the other way and just go, no, not happening, not picking those players. A player that springs to example was Ollie Watkins last season. I remember. Everyone got him. I said, there's no way I'm getting him. He is an absolute trap. And, that very week, I think he scored a goal and got an assist in that game. So I lost out on the FOMO. But then after that, I think he blanked for like 10 or 15 games in a row. So, I mean, I was right long term. But, there was that FOMO element. And, when you don't have a player that a lot of other people have brought in, it is crushing, particularly over like a 1 game week basis.
I really like that. So almost you let FOMO take over a little bit if it's something that you were thinking about already, but you don't let it sway your decision so much that you'll go at the start of the week from never considering a player to all of a sudden they're in your team. I think that's a really nice way to approach it. So we do have the results from Dan's questionnaire. So Dan is about to be exposed live. No, he's acknowledged that he is someone that experiences FOMO, and the questionnaire came back as high FOMO propensity. So it's not very high. It's not the highest possible, and I've given this to other people, and there has been higher. You're very similar to me, Dan. So I come back as having fairly high FOMO propensity, and I do wonder if it's something about being a content creator as well. Not only are you having to worry about the content, not only are you having to worry about all of the things on YouTube, different platforms, but there are so many eyes on what you're doing. And we'll discuss this a bit later in the risk-taking section, but having all those eyes on you does influence the way you make decisions. And those people that can get away with not revealing their team, as, again, Dan, if you've watched Dan's content last season, he had to get to that stage because people were copying, because he was so good. But people that don't reveal their team probably don't experience FOMO as much. They're very, very concentrated on what they're doing. And it does make it very tricky, I think, when you have to show your team to multiple people. Do you think the content creation aspect changes the way you approach the community and the way that you let the community sway you, Dan?
With regards to FOMO, I think definitely, because when you're making videos and you're trying to make videos that people will enjoy, you want people to kind of agree with you, and you want people to kind of get on board with what you're saying. And it's much easier to get people on board with what you're saying if you're saying something that the majority of people are already kind of thinking. People want that confirmation bias really in content, rather than a lot of the time to give them a new idea. So yeah, to be honest, sometimes, and it, like I say, it makes you look very, very foolish if you go against a heavily brought in player, a heavily bought player. So yeah, it's definitely, there's definitely some kind of impact there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So linking on to FOMO, obviously one of the key things that we work out if we are going to have this fear of missing out is ownership, right? And ownership has traditionally been in the game since the start, I believe. I haven't played it that long. Dan hasn't played it that long. We are fairly new managers, I suppose, in recent years. But ownership's been in the game a while. Ownership tells you very little because there are a lot of dead teams that we call, or zombie teams, that just don't make any transfers. They bought a player at the start of the game and then they've just never taken them out of the team. So we've had this new introduction of effective ownership, which gives you a bit more of an idea about active managers in the game. It takes captaincy into account, and it gives you ownership at different ranks as well. Dan, what do you think effective ownership's done to the game? What do you think the role of it is? Do you pay attention to effective ownership, or are you more interested in, do I think they're going to score points? Yes, I'll bring them in.
It goes both ways. I think, with captaincy, I feel like I kind of like a safe captain. So if I know a player is super highly owned, super highly captained, a high effective ownership, then yeah, I will typically go for them as a captain. But also, it's kind of nice to try and find those nuggets with those low effective ownerships as well, I think. So it goes both ways. It's an interesting addition, and certainly as soon as the game week starts, I will look at the effective ownership of all of the players in my team to kind of just decide how much I'm supporting each player. If I've got a player with 10% effective ownership, I'm well behind them. If I've got a player with 85% effective ownership, and we all had that with Trent and Cancelo last year, it's kind of like, meh, if they do well, they do well. If they lose their clean sheet points, whatever.
Absolutely. I agree with that. So effective ownership, the way that we get this is through all these sort of live rank sites, livefpl.net. If you've not yet used it, absolutely incredible site. But do you think there's potentially something to be said for live rank tools increasing fear of missing out and increasing that dread at the weekend? Do you think that, as well as all of the positives, that live rank tools are potentially worsening the game, or do you think they are only improving it?
I do think they are improving it, and you don't have to use them if you don't want to, I suppose. It's just nice to have these options and all these new tools, and I suppose. But yeah, you see a player that you don't have in your FPL team at 100, 120% effective ownership. You're just going to be fearful of that player. You're not even going to want to watch the game in which they play. Yeah. So it can, if you're really obsessive over it, then I can see why it would make the game worse for you.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key thing here. We're not going to talk too much about mental health today because we've got sort of the other stuff we want to know, what makes Dan tick basically as like an FPL manager. But I do think that if you experience negative mood associated with FPL and you're someone that checks live ranks repeatedly, I just think the volatility of going up and down, going up as much as going down, your rank changes so much throughout the weekend, and realistically, it doesn't matter. I mean, your rank doesn't matter till game week 38, but throughout the game week, I think if you're someone that is struggling, maybe just take a little bit of a step back. And I think that's something I'm going to do a little bit as well. I don't necessarily struggle, but I think it's definitely something where we don't need to check our rank after every goal. It almost becomes that obsessive. I know this player's 5%. I wonder what their 10 points is going to get me. So that is something to bear in mind. There we go. Dan has acknowledged that he does suffer from FOMO. He is human like the rest of us, despite having a fantastic rank, but only in the decisions where potentially he was already thinking that way anyway, and maybe wants to go a little bit safer. Doesn't let it sway him altogether, which is really, really critical here. I don't think you want to let the general masses and the FPL community sway you to from not even considering a player to suddenly like bringing them in and captaining them. So that's really interesting there, Dan. The next section links in really nice with this because we're going to take a look at risk taking. So building on really nicely from fear of missing out or FOMO, we're now going to move on to risk tolerance. I think arguably one of the most critical things in any game that you play, if you look a little bit about game theory, poker, whatever games you play really, there's this element of risk. And I think it all boils to every question that you'll ask a content creator, all the questions that Dan and I will receive on YouTube, a lot of them boil down to risk. Should I bring in this player even though no one else is? Should I not bring in this player even though, again, linking back to FOMO, they've got really high ownership? I think pretty much like over 50% of the decisions in FPL come down to risk. So again, I have given Dan a risk tolerance questionnaire. But firstly, I wanted to pose two questions to Dan and also to you guys that are watching this. So I will flash them on your screen. These are two very, very well used sort of vignettes or scenarios in psychology. So I haven't created these. I know monetary can be difficult to answer, but these are very, very well used. And it gives you a bit of an idea about someone's risk tolerance. So Dan, I'm going to give you a would you rather this or would you rather that? So would you rather, say I've got a big wad of cash in front of me, would you rather £3,000 guaranteed now? And no, sorry, Dan, I'm not going to pay you £3,000 for featuring in this video. Or would you rather an 80% chance of winning £4,000? So it's £3,000 guaranteed, or 8 out of 10 times you're going to win £4,000.
I'll take the £3,000 now, please, Ross.
£3,000, 100%.
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. Unfortunately, I can't offer everyone watching this £3,000. I'd love to. Okay, so the second one, a little bit more difficult because here you don't have anything guaranteed. The second one is, would you rather a 90% chance of winning £3,000, so 9 out of 10 times you win £3,000, or 45% chance of winning £6,000? So 4/5 times out of 10, you win a full £6,000. So this way, neither of them you're guaranteed. You could go for the 9 out of 10 and not win the £3,000. What are you thinking here?
Again, I'm taking the money now. I'm taking the £3,000.
Cool. So playing the odds, playing fairly safe, not risking it. Is that just because it's monetary based, or do you think that's the sort of way you would approach most situations in your everyday life?
I think I approach most situations in my everyday life that way, to be honest. Like, particularly, I know it's you've kind of done a money thing there. I've never gambled or placed a bet in my entire life. It's just not for me. No risks for me, thank you, in my real life anyway.
Okay, excellent. Well, that perfectly leads on to the questionnaire. So again, I'll flash on for all of these questionnaires, I'll flash some example questions on the screen so that you know what Dan's been answering, the questions that he's been answering. Dan was definite risk averse. So Dan was actually I've handed this questionnaire to a few different people. Dan was actually the lowest risk aversity that I've seen out of anyone that's filled in this questionnaire. So what that basically means, risk averse means don't take any risks at all, or at least he doesn't favor taking risks in his everyday life. Again, all of these questionnaires are about everyday life scenarios. They're not necessarily about FPL. So Dan, you've said for those two examples, you wouldn't take the risk. The questionnaire comes back very risk averse. Do you think that drives home how you play FPL? Would you say you're quite a risk averse manager that would tend to play safe wherever possible?
Definitely not. I feel like
Okay.
it goes the complete opposite way because I take absolutely no risks and have no excitement in my real life whatsoever. So I think maybe that actually kind of feeds into the way I play FPL, and I use kind of FPL as a release of risk taking and excitement a little bit. And similar with other video games I play, like I play a lot of first person shooters, for example. I'm a very aggressive kind of gamer, if you like. So I think, I'm a very boring person in real life, so I have to make up for that somewhere in my life. And I think FPL is maybe that source of excitement for me.
I really like that. And this is to say, so this is a really interesting one because I don't think you need to necessarily follow on from what you do in your everyday life to FPL. And as Dan said there, doesn't take risks in your everyday life, but absolutely smashed it last season. And just so you know, guys, you do not get to pretty much top 10 in the world by not taking risks. You can't play safe every single time. So that's really interesting. Interestingly, research suggests that in any sort of gaming and anything like this, poker, whether it be FPL, all of these different sort of risk-seeking games, they tend to suggest that if you follow your personality as closely as possible, you're more likely to have success. So it would actually suggest that if you don't take risks in your everyday life, you should probably follow a similar managerial style to what you would experience in everyday life. So this would actually suggest you might have a bit of like dissonance, we call it, Dan. So you're a bit of a risk taker in FPL, but not in everyday life. So I'll be very interested to see how it goes again next season if you continue to take risks, or if you maybe resort back to how you used to, how like your everyday life goes. Definitely interesting there. You alluded to this earlier though. Are there certain decisions every single week that you feel more comfortable taking a risk with? So I think the three major decisions we have every single week are captaincy, transfers, and bench decisions. And then we also throw up every now and again the chip strategy, which is really interesting because I love the chip strategy that you played. You can give us a bit of a discussion around that. So last season, were there certain decisions every week and also with the chips that you were more comfortable taking risk with, and potentially some that you just thought it isn't worth taking a risk here?
I don't know. Well, I mean, the season before, like, the chips all went very badly. I just used the template chip strategy. So I thought this season I would just try and do something a little bit different and try and figure out what works specifically for me. I think people spend so much time trying to figure out the chip strategy that everyone else is using and kind of neglect their own team and what actually suits their own team a lot. So I think that, it wasn't really about taking a risk. It was just about what suited me logically, I guess. I think I just went for what I think was a logical course of action, which a lot of people actually disagreed with because it was not the norm. But that was not because I was taking a risk. I wasn't going against the grain because it was a risk. It just, the normal chip strategy just didn't really work for me, or I didn't think it did anyway.
Cool. And then with captaincies, transfers, and benching, do you tend to play slightly safe with captaincy and take your risk with transfers? Do you play it the other way, or is it all context? You differ between the two?
I pretty much will only captain a differential where I think there's going to be a captaincy split. So I think if during a game week, if I know 80% of people are going to go for Salah, I'm going for Salah. If I think maybe it's going to be 30% Salah, 30% Kane or someone like that, that's the kind of game week I'd be more likely to go for a captain on someone a little bit different, I think.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think the key thing here, and it's something that I need to drive home, is you don't need to take a risk with your captaincy ever. And specifically, you don't need to actively seek it earlier on in the season. And I think the back end of the season, you can start taking risks with these captaincy, with these transfers, but you're not going to win FPL in the first few weeks. It just doesn't happen. Even if you are top of the world by 300 points, you can still lose FPL. You can have a poor second half of the season. So you can't win FPL in the first weeks, but you can definitely lose it. Because if you're like 7 million after 10 weeks, then you're going to really, really struggle. So I agree with that. I think basically only take a risk if you really need to. I like what Dan said there about even when he takes risks, he almost doesn't see it as a risk. He's not taking the risk for the sake of taking a risk. He's making that decision because he thinks it's the correct decision. And it just so happens in that week that it is a bit of a risk. The final thing is, Dan, do you take risks according to your rank? And this is the one I'm most interested in because I've never been in your position. Like, I've never even been in the top 1K. So I would never know what it's like to be that high. Did you start taking more or less risks according to your rank, and also according to how many game weeks were left in the season? How did your risk taking evolve across the season?
I think certainly at the back end of the season, I was going quite safe, to my own detriment, to be honest. And I was started making moves that I wouldn't ordinarily make, just because I just wanted to stay in the top 1,000. That's all I really cared about. So yeah, certainly at the beginning of the season, pretty template. No real risks at any given time. I think in the first half, I took some risks with some transfers, but then when we got to the second half of the season, I think I started going a little bit more sensible, bar a couple of game weeks where I had a strong feeling or saw some strong data to suggest something a little bit different. Yeah, the higher rank you are, the safer you tend to play, because you just get. Like, I've never been in this rank before. Like Ross, I'm sure you potentially be the same. You get this amazing rank, and you're just like, I just need to finish here. I just at the end of the day, what counts is what your rank is at game week 38. It's not worth throwing it away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this gets a bad rap, and people will give people stick for playing safe. Do whatever suits you and whatever makes you enjoy the game more. And if your end goal, specifically for content creators, unfortunately, we kind of need it. Your end goal is probably your rank. But if your end goal is enjoyment, or if your end goal is truly to win FPL, take more risks the higher your rank you get. I don't think that you necessarily should get bad stick or a bad rap for taking risks more or less at certain ranks. I think you do what suits you. And the recurring theme throughout this series, and also through what Dan's saying, is play your own game here. Like, that is what Dan does so well, is that different chip strategy, different transfers, different captaincy, whether that be because he's a content creator, whether that be because it's his sort of personnel and his behavioral tendencies. I think that's the key thing here, is playing your own game. So we are building a bit of a sort of behavioral profile for Dan here. We've got fairly high FOMO propensity in real life anyway, but maybe slightly less so in FPL. We've got definite risk averse, but the opposite in FPL. Knows when to strike. And I think that's the key thing. I'm not necessarily sure, watching Dan's season, that Dan takes risks all the time. No. But when he does, he knows when to strike, and he takes those big risks, and they tend to pay off because he times them well. I think that's probably the key thing.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's that I'm a risk taker necessarily, but I'm willing to be different. I don't have a problem with doing something a little bit different. I suppose if I feel that it is the right thing to do, maybe.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a nice take-home message. Right, so we've got FOMO propensity, we've got risk tolerance. The best debate of all next: gut feeling versus analytics. Which one should we trust? So moving on slightly here to a slightly different topic, we're looking at gut feeling versus analytics. And this is something that gets a lot of attention in the FPL community. And to be honest, it's one of my cop-out answers. If you ask me a question in the comments and I'm struggling, I go with, I do this, but trust your gut feeling. But there is reasons for that. And if you are interested, I'll try and remember to flash it on screen. I've done an entire video, it was about half an hour long, about the role of gut feeling in FPL. So I am very passionate about using gut feeling. Not necessarily because I think gut feeling is going to result in more accurate decisions, but you tend to be more at peace with your decisions. If you are trusting your gut feeling, you're trusting your hunch, that's basically what your gut feeling is, this hunch, or this intuition is another word to use. You're more likely to be happy if it goes wrong. Whereas if I make a move because Dan FPL Mate has said something on his YouTube video and it goes wrong, I'll resent Dan, I'll resent myself because I didn't go with my gut feeling. And you just tend to feel a slightly more anger and slightly more negativity towards FPL. So that's why I think gut feeling is great. What do you think, Dan, about gut feeling? Firstly, again, I'm interested in your everyday life. Do you trust your intuition? Do you trust your gut feeling? And then also in FPL, do you think gut feeling is something that you pay quite a lot of attention to? Or do you think it's a load of nonsense, one of those things that isn't actually real and no one knows what gut feeling really is?
Yeah, I think like gut feeling, intuition, whatever you want to call it, I think I only really use it in any situation, be that real life, FPL, in a tiebreaker situation. I think it is pretty much nonsense. I don't really see any real benefit for gut feeling, but I understand how playing with your gut is a little bit more exciting, a little bit more fun, and perhaps a little bit more rewarding. I just think if you want to compete at a high level in FPL, you kind of have to limit the amount of gut feeling you use, maybe.
That's an excellent tip. I genuinely do believe that. Unless you get a one-off season where everything goes your way, I think you'll find it difficult to do well on a consistent basis if you over-rely on your gut feeling. And something which Simon March, one of the previous winners of FPL, if you've been playing a while, Simon March is very well known over on Twitter and also just in the FPL community. He's into behavioral economics, and he said the key issue that he has with gut feeling is sometimes we don't know what its source is. So sometimes we'll say, it's my gut feeling, but really what that is someone told you something on Monday and they've influenced you. Or you've watched one of Dan's videos and it's gone into the back of your mind, and then you're like, that's my gut feeling. It might not be your gut feeling. It might be that someone else has influenced you or something's happened that's resulted in you feeling that way. So it can be sometimes quite difficult to attribute what your gut feeling source actually is. So the opposite is more of an analytical approach or a logical approach. Do you think in FPL then, Dan, you take more of a logical, not necessarily, when I say analytics, it doesn't mean expected data. It's just more of a logical approach where you plan, trust a bit of data, work out in a very analytical fashion. Do you think that suits your style a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. I use a lot of data when, making my videos, when kind of making decisions in FPL. Definitely all about the analytics and the data and stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean, you use it in a certain way. Different people use data in different ways, but I certainly think there is definitely a place for it in FPL.
And just a question in around this, I get this question a lot. Dan, how long do you think in advance you should plan in FPL? So I get this question, especially at the start of the season quite often. What would be your number one recommendation? Do you plan 4 weeks in advance? Do you plan 6 weeks? Do you plan maybe 10 to 12 quite loosely and then focus on the weeks in front of you? What was that magic number for you?
Oh, I don't really know. I would say probably around 4 or 5 is about right, I would say.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. That's roughly what I tend to say 4 to 6 weeks. I think any more than 6 weeks and you're losing sight, there can be 6 game weeks. Oh, there's a bloody fly is following me around. 6 weeks or more, I think you're going to lose sight of what's in front of you. If you miss out on the 6 weeks worth of points in front of you because you're too busy planning in the future, you're going to really struggle. But equally, if you're only looking 2 or 3 weeks ahead, you could get snapped with something that happens in 3 or 4 weeks that you just didn't see coming. So I think it's absolutely critical that you find that fine balance, whatever works for you. And I would say just have an eye on 8 to 10 weeks. Just have an eye on what is coming. I think that's the best way to do it. But for that 4 to 6 week range, I think is absolutely ideal there when you're looking at this more analytical approach. So looking at Dan's results from the questionnaire, this is the third questionnaire that we gave him. Each of the questions, so we had 20 questions for analytics. Or an analytical approach. Then we had 20 questions for gut feeling or intuition. That then translates to a score out of 100 for each of those. And that we can then transfer that to basically a percentage. So I can say Dan is a X percentage analytical person. So it works out quite nicely like that. So Dan came through as 56% intuitive, right, which is actually quite low, but not the lowest that I've seen. So in his everyday life, and again, these questions aren't FPL specific, Dan is a 56% intuitive person. So he trusts his gut feeling more often than not to some extent, but never really over-relies on it, which is in line with what he's just said there. However, and this is the highest that I have seen, Dan is a 90% analytical person.
Whoa.
Right, so very, very analytical. And again, this doesn't necessarily mean actual data or expected data. This isn't a specific type. It's more the approach that you take to FPL. Lots of planning, very structured, very comprehensive. Again, really lends in quite well to the content creation side of things, I think, personally. Do you think that pretty much sums you up? Very, very analytical with a splash of intuition every now and again?
I suppose so, yeah. But, I mean, when you're a content creator, you have to be analytical. You have to know everything. If you don't have the answers to every single question, every 6 different scenario, what the 8 different chip strategies are to use, what the 4 different transfer routes are you can use, you've got to know all these things. So I suppose you have to be analytical if you want to be a content creator.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think content creation, if any of you guys are watching this, content creators, you'll know absolutely. But it would be very strange if Dan rocked up to the video and just went, I'm picking this player because it's my gut feeling, and then just logged off. Like he's got to give some sort of justification for you. And if you just trust your gut feeling every time, there's no justification there. The final thing I just wanted to mention on gut feeling is the little tactic that I've got for how to know what your gut feeling is telling you. So I know a lot of people will say, well, I don't actually know what my gut feeling is saying. The key is a coin, and you can do a virtual coin flip. It doesn't have to be a physical coin if you don't have coins anymore. When you flip a coin, in midair, as you're about to release it, you get a bit of a sense about what you want to happen. And even if you don't, then release it. As soon as you look at that, what is your initial reaction? If you want to do like best 2 out of 3, if you want to flip again, it probably tells you that whatever that result was is not your gut feeling. So again, as Dan said perfectly, when you've got that 50-50 decision, go with your gut feeling maybe then. And a really nice way is to flip a coin there. And I think that'll give you a bit of an idea about what your intuition is truly telling you. Okay, so that is gut feeling versus analytics. Just to recap again, Dan is a very analytical person, which I think is ideal for consistently good finishes in FPL, and it probably puts him in good stead for next season. And he gets his intuition in there every now and again, but mainly in those 50-50 calls when the analytics has narrowed it down to 2 or 3 options. So guys, the next section we're going to look at is something called your chronotype. Now, don't stress. I know it's a word we don't really use very often. It basically comes down to, are you a morning person or your evening person? Now, that isn't everything with it. Again, if you know Chronotype, it's to do with basically your sleep cycle, when you sleep, when you're awake, and when you're feeling most alert, and when your cognitive functioning is basically at its highest. And I think we generally kind of have an idea about this. You'll hear people say, I'm definitely not a morning person, or I function quite well in the evening. But there are actually questionnaires that you can fill out to give you a much better idea. They ask all of the right questions about whether you are a morning person or an evening person. And I did give that questionnaire to Dan, but I'm interested to hear him first. In your general life, are you give a bit of an insight to the audience about who you are as a person? Do you tend to wake up early if you had a choice? Do you go to sleep late? Do you keep to your schedule? Or are you someone that maybe sleeps all over the place, sometimes late, sometimes early?
Well, I mean, anyone who watches my YouTube videos will probably know that there is absolutely no organization to upload times whatsoever. Sometimes I'll upload at like 3 p.m. Sometimes I will upload at like 1 a.m. or something. So it's definitely a disorganized mess. And that is in part due to the fact I'm not a morning person at all. And I hate recording content the day before. So that basically means I'm going to get up and I'm going to work usually not until the afternoon. And the video just is uploaded whenever it's uploaded, I guess. So, yeah, I think that probably best defines what my chronotype is, which is a new word for me, by the way, Ross. Thank you.
There we go. Love it. What a good student you are, Dan. So let us know down below, by the way, what is your chronotype? Are you a morning person or an evening person? I am very much an evening person. However, I do function quite well in the morning. So when I say to people, I'm not really a morning person, they go, oh, really? Because I'm not very snappy. I tend to perform quite well, but much prefer in the evening. The book that all of this has come from, by the way, I'll do a little plug, just a little plug. This book here that we're doing, all the questionnaires that I've given to Dan today are in the book. I wrote this book at 2 a.m. Pretty much every single page of this was written because I didn't have time during the day, but also I just get into a bit of a flow state in the evening. So do let us know down below whether you're a morning person or an evening person. Have you ever considered how the time, because we did speak about this off air, have you ever considered how time of day might influence your decisions? Have you thought about the time of day that you make FPL decisions and that you do FPL research?
No, I've not thought about this at all. It literally never entered my mind. Do you reckon it's important then? Is that what you think?
Absolutely. So essentially there is a lot of research specifically in sport, and I'm more in sports psychology than I am any other area, but also in things like chess, that demonstrate, there's one study, I'll try and remember to link it below, but it is in the book if you want to go and read the study for yourself. Performance can be increased by up to 26%, so this is to do with decision making, if you align the time of day that you do that task with your chronotype. So if you're a morning person and you do the thing or make the decision at the time of day which suits your chronotype, you can improve the accuracy of your decision making by up to 26%. So if you think in FPL, the difference between a 50k rank and 10k rank is not 26%. So if you can increase your decision making by 3 or 4%, that could be the difference in a crazy rank. So I think FPL is all about finding these small wins where you can and trying to tweak your decision making ever so slightly. I don't think anyone watching this should suddenly say, well, Dan does this, so I'm going to suddenly change who I am. But chronotype's such a nice one because it's so individualized, and you can find out your chronotype and you can make the decisions at the time of day which suits you. More importantly, though, I think it's absolutely critical that you do the research at the time of day which suits you. The actual decision making, most of us have to do it before the deadline. Like, I don't think you have much of a choice. Sometimes you have to wait for the press conferences. You have to wait until basically 5 minutes before the deadline in case we get early team news. But you can do all of your research and decide on your options and narrow it down at the time of day which suits you. There is absolutely no reason that you can't do that in the evening or the morning. And then you say, right, I've done all of this research. I'm going to bring in this player if this goes this way, or I'm going to bring in that player if it goes the other way. So that's personally what I would do there. Now, Dan, you've said you're not a morning person. That is absolutely we got from the questionnaire. So you have come through as a definite evening type. So you can be neutral, you can be moderate morning, moderate evening, or you can be definite morning, definite evening. Dan was strongly in the definite evening. So this basically says you don't function particularly well in the morning. You probably shouldn't be doing your research in the morning. And if you're trying to decide on a live stream on a Saturday morning what decision to make, it's probably not ideal for you. Is that something that you've noticed yourself?
Yeah, Dan? Now you mention it, I have had a couple of stinkers where I've made a decision in the morning during a deadline stream. You've got the fact that you are barely awake. You've got the fact that you've got all of these questions in the chat that you've got to answer and think about, and you just end up, well, making a gut decision. Going back to the gut stuff, which is not always the best way to do things.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And then the final thing on Chronotype is just another piece of information for everyone watching this, is throughout the day, as the day increases, we build up what is known as sleep pressure. Now, as sleep pressure builds up and there's melatonin, the melatonin build up in your body, I won't go through all of the neuroscience, don't worry. As that builds up throughout the day, you start to take more and more risks as your cognitive functioning decreases. So they found this in a study of chess players. There was 1,000 chess players to find this. If you play chess, you might know this yourself. As the day increased and as it got later and later throughout the tournament, the risks started to increase and they were heavily correlated with the time of day and the amount of sleep that the participant had had. What this basically tells us is you can actually adapt when you make your decisions in FPL based on how much of a risk you want to take. So if you're in a really tricky position and you want to play as safe as possible, as well as aligning your decision with your chronotype, try and do your research in the morning. Because in the mornings, you're less likely to take those massive risks. Whereas by the time it gets to the evening, if it's 11 p.m., 12 a.m., right before the price changes, not only the price change is probably stressing you out, but it's also going to lead to a more risky decision because of the sleep pressure there. So maybe, Dan, this might link in. You're an evening person that likes to take risks in FPL. Making your evening, doing your research in the evenings, maybe is encouraging you to be even more risk-seeking than you potentially already are.
Hey, yeah, maybe. There's some interesting stuff, and it does make sense as well. It's good to learn. I'm learning so much, Ross. I'm learning so much.
This is an educational video. Yeah. So there you go, guys. Basically, I don't pay too much attention to it. Don't worry too much. Like, I don't pay lots of attention, but I know for me, I like to do my research early evening. It suits me too because I'm paying into the fact that I'm an evening person, but I'm not going so late that sleep pressure is massively built up, right? So it's that early evening for me. So if you're an evening person, I'd suggest maybe between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. So there you go, Dan. That's my advice for you. Try not to make too many decisions in the morning because it doesn't suit you, and try instead to do most of your research, most of your decision making between 6 and 9 p.m. How's that sound?
Yeah, no, it sounds good. I mean, to be fair, I would have to be awake in the morning to make a decision in the morning. So, I mean, the pressure's slightly off. But no, definitely. Yeah, I think I do that a little bit already, but I definitely will pay closer attention to that going into next season.
Sounds good. Right, so the final thing we're going to discuss, unfortunately, Dan, is Arsenal and Manchester United and how we are influenced by potentially our own club bias.
Okay.
So the fifth and final section, again, as you can see on your screen, is own club bias. Now, interestingly, this is something which hasn't received much attention in the psychological literature, even in fandom literature, of which there is actually quite a lot of research. Own club bias doesn't really pop up. What we do know about own club bias is that it tends to sensationalize you either way. So if you support a club, say for me it's Manchester United, when we're winning, I want to massively get on board with that. And it's called basking in reflective glory, right? This is a term we use in psychology. It basically means when your team's winning, you want to say I, we. You associate yourself heavily with that team. And when they're losing, it's called coughing. You cut off reflected failure. So this is basically when you say, when you're losing, you dissociate yourself completely with your club. So I think you'll probably know this in yourself when you're watching this. You probably think, yeah, when we're winning, I want to be a supporter of the team. And when we're not, I'm very frustrated. And maybe I don't watch the games or I don't want to go to the games to watch. So that's all we really know about own club bias. But in FPL, it's absolutely critical, in my opinion, that you don't show any own club bias. So Dan, tell us a little bit about who you support. Maybe give us just a bit of background about why you support them and why do you do it yourself? Why do you support this team?
I think no one really has a choice in what football team they support. It's just something that happens to you when you're a kid. I support Arsenal, and for me, it was, I don't know do you remember these, Ross? There was like these little toy figurines. I think they were called Power Pods or Micro Stars or something. They were like tiny little bobblehead football figurines.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I do.
them?
I can't remember what they're called. Yeah, I remember them.
And someone at school gave me a Thierry Henry one. Then I went on and found out who Thierry Henry was. I must have only been like, I don't know, 7 or 8 or something. And thought, oh, wow, he's really awesome. And he plays for Arsenal. I think I will support Arsenal. And, you know, it doesn't take much for a kid to support a football team, to be fair, unless you've got, you know, strong pressures from your parents or something random happens at school, like you get a little toy or, you know, you fall in love with a certain player, which don't take much when you're 6 or 7 years old. But that was me. What's your Manchester United story?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I used to get called a glory hunter. Funnily enough, I don't anymore because Manchester United don't have any glory to hunt for. So that's nice. At least people don't accuse me of that. But essentially, my granddad back in the day would have been like 1950s, 1960s, was looking for a club to support. None of his family had watched football. So he thought, you know what, I'm just going to pick a team. And he liked the team at that time. So he decided to support Manchester United. And it's basically been throughout every generation since that. So it's my mum's side. My dad's side actually supported like West Ham. So I'm glad I didn't go that way. But I'm from sort of London, Essex, so definitely not from Manchester. But I've been to my fair share of games, and similar to you, once you start supporting a team, unless it's not serious, there is no way you can even think about supporting another team. So definitely like instilled in me from birth. There's lots of pictures of me when I'm a baby in a Manchester United shirt, and it's been that way pretty much my whole life there. And I guess we grew up in the golden era when Manchester United and Arsenal were actually good at football. Now I mean, for Arsenal, there are promising signs. In my opinion, obviously as an Arsenal fan, maybe you don't feel like that, but for Manchester United, it is an absolute state, and I don't even know what's going to happen in the future years. But in FPL, obviously we have the option to choose up to 3 players from the team that we support. And it's finding that balance because, like I said, a lot of the research will focus on the fact that we're very biased towards the team we support. We always want to bring in those players, etc. I actually think sometimes it can almost be the other way. Sometimes we're almost like, my team don't perform very well. I know they're crap. They're not going to continue to perform that way. Therefore, I'm not going to pick that player. So do you think, how does being an Arsenal fan affect your selection of Arsenal players? Do you tend to favour them? Do you tend to not favour them? Or do you just try and stay as objective as possible?
Honestly, like I'm not gonna lie, I'm not like a massive die-hard Arsenal fan. If Arsenal lose 10 games in a row, it's not going to impact my life whatsoever, and I think that is in a way like an advantage. Like, I'm a football fan, I'm a Premier League fan. I like watching any game of football, and you know, I've got called out of it on this so many times. You know, celebrating when my captain Son will score, and people say you're meant to be an Arsenal fan. But honestly, I don't care that much. And perhaps that is because of a long period of, you know, not very much joy from Arsenal has kind of desensitized me to the whole thing. If anything, I'm probably more pessimistic. You know, I will not avoid Arsenal players. And I think that's kind of what you were just alluding to. I will avoid Arsenal players because I don't think Arsenal are very good. That's maybe changed a little bit more recently, but maybe it goes the other way with if you're like a Liverpool supporter. You know, you see how good Liverpool are at the moment and you think, oh wow, my club is amazing, I'm feeling positive about them, I'm going to pick their FPL players maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you've said there, some people won't be able to do it. And I'll probably say that I struggle with it because I am a diehard United fan, in that you, if possible, especially in FPL, try and dissociate your self-worth, your self-image, who you are as a person from your club. Because some people will tie their self-image and their self-worth so closely to their club that when their club loses, it ruins their weekend, it ruins everything, when really the club doesn't affect your everyday life. I know you do support that club, but you shouldn't associate them that closely, in my opinion. And I do think that it will go one way or the other. So I'm interested, Dan. Obviously, last season, I actually realised when I did my team of the season, when we did the team of the season on your channel, I had 4 or 5 players noted down from Arsenal that actually were really good for me and actually made my season quite well. So I'm thinking Ramsdale at specific periods, Saka, incredible throughout the season. Obviously, we had Smith Rowe and Martinelli at various points. We've had Ben White, Gabriel. How did it work for you last season? Did you jump on any of these players at the right time? Did your pessimism cause you to miss any of these hauls, any of these hot runs? Or do you think you actually timed all of them quite well?
I don't know. I don't know if there's maybe a subconscious bias because I didn't really have Arsenal players throughout the season. I mean, obviously I had Smith Rowe during his little golden period, and then I moved him on to Saka, you know, when Smith Rowe went a little bit quieter. But that was pretty much it. I think those 2 players were the only 2 Arsenal players I had outside of my free hit teams. Wait, no, I had Lacazette. I had Lacazette as well. Yeah, okay. That went badly. I don't know. The answer is I don't know. I don't know if there was any bias there or not. If there was, it would have been subconscious, I guess.
Okay, absolutely. I like that. So I guess the key thing here is just be careful not to go too far either way. And I think that's the key thing I want to drive home, is that a lot of people will talk about this own club bias, that you always pick players from your own team. I actually think more often than not it's the other way around, and you probably end up being a little bit pessimistic and I just want to wait, because there's no way Manchester United can win 3 games in a row. Surely not. I'm not going to bring all the players in for that. So just be a little bit careful and try and be as objective as possible. Look at the data, look at the eye test, ask some opinions of other people if you feel like you might be biased. If your team are performing well, bring them in, and if they're not, don't favour them and don't be too harsh on them, I suppose. So if we're just going to run back through all of that stuff there, Dan's behavioural profile. So what makes Dan tick? What makes him who he is as an FPL manager? We've got high FOMO propensity, but only again on the decisions where he feels like he might have gone that way anyway. Doesn't let him affect his overall decision making. We've got definite risk averse in real life, but likes to take risks in FPL almost as a way to just that opportunity to take risks. But it's about timing those risks and not always taking them. We've got him as a 90% analytical person, 56% intuitive. So wherever possible, Dan will take an analytical approach, try and plan ahead, try and trust logic as opposed to his gut feeling. But when he gets down to a 50-50, hopefully along with the help of a coin, he will trust his gut feeling. We've got definite evening type. So again, Dan should be making his decisions in the evening, but not too late. Otherwise, we'll get obviously sleep pressure. And then own club bias, pretty objective. And if he is showing any bias, it's probably a little bit subconscious as opposed to being something that he demonstrates on a regular basis. So I feel like we got to know you quite well there, Dan. Your behavioural makeup and what makes you tick.
I feel like you're inside my brain, Ross, and I should probably quickly note, I just realised I've had so many Arsenal players in my team. I had Tomiyasu, Ramsdale.
Oh dear.
Yeah,
oh dear.
Okay, yeah, maybe I am Arsenal biased. Maybe I do like Arsenal players. But no, look, yeah, this has been interesting. I've learned a little bit about myself. I've learned a little bit of some techniques I can use. Very helpful, Ross.
Good to hear. So I'm going to put you on the spot a bit. I haven't asked you ahead of time to prepare anything for this. Just as an FPL manager, it doesn't have to be psychological. Have you got like maybe 1 or 2 tips for my audience? Because it's a different audience to you, Dan. If people haven't seen you before, what would be your 1 or 2 tips? Doesn't have to be too many, about how you can have a good FPL season where you enjoy it, but you also have a pretty good overall rank as well.
I think I've got 2 tips, and they kind of do tie into each other a little bit. The first one would be, or certainly something that I kind of implemented last season, which I'm definitely going to be taking into next season, is to try and get on players early, try and beat the crowd. And, you know, if you start trying to play catch up and try and catch up to the template, it's not going to work. So I definitely would say try and get ahead of time. You know, if you see a player who's done really well in 1 or 2 games, don't wait for the 3rd game. Get on them, see what happens. If a player has just come back from injury and you know they're a good player, like Chilwell or Reece James comes back from injury, get on them immediately rather than waiting a couple of games for them to bed in. So definitely that would be my first tip. And secondarily, which does, like I say, tie into it, is be prepared to cut your losses nice and early. Something in previous seasons that I didn't do was I would stubbornly stick to a player under the guise of, you know, I put my faith in this player for a reason. I'm going to trust that reason from a few weeks ago, but things change a lot in a couple of weeks. So if a player does not go well, you know, I brought in a lot of random players during the season, but the key was, and people looked at my season and said, Dan, every time you pick a player, they end up doing really well and going on these amazing runs. That's not true at all. It's just that the ones that didn't work out, they were gone after 1 or 2 game weeks. You know, I removed them as soon as physically possible. So yeah, if you're ahead of the template, you can afford to spend transfers removing deadweight players. So that does help. You know, getting ahead is the only real way you can use those. The second tactic, I suppose. But I don't know. That's kind of what I like doing this season. I'm definitely going to try and do it again next season and see if it works.
Absolutely. And just to finish that, one of those points there, the point about when you've invested in a player and you've owned them for a certain amount of time, that is called the endowment effect. So it is actually a really, really well-researched psychological bias. And so if you're someone that when you own a player, you struggle to sell them and you don't know when to sell them, do not beat yourself up, because that is literally one of the most well-researched cognitive biases out there. And everyone, including myself and including Dan, struggle with that. I've invested. How long do I wait? How long do I wait before selling them? It's one of the trickiest decisions in FPL, but definitely driven by psychology once again. So there you have it, guys. I hope you have enjoyed today's video. This is my first collaboration on my channel, so I'm really glad that I was able to get Dan on. And hopefully you guys are going to enjoy this series. If there's anything that you want me to change, length, graphics, the things we talk about, and like I said, if there are any guests that you specifically want to see on the channel, please do let me know. But yeah, thank you massively, Dan. I really do appreciate you coming on the channel. If you are new to Dan somehow and you haven't subscribed to him, you don't follow him on Twitter, follow him on Twitter. Is it just at FPL Mate?
Yeah, FPL Mate on everything. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, everything. Cool.
Perfect. So I'll leave his YouTube link. First link in the description will be to his YouTube. Go subscribe. Go show him some love. There will be a ridiculous amount of preseason content from Dan and throughout the season as well. He's a full-time YouTuber. So if you're looking for more, as we see here, analytical FPL content, really, really well presented, do go follow Dan and show him some love on some of his videos. So thank you very much, Dan. I really do appreciate it. And like I said, do drop comments down below for who you want to see next and any changes you want to see in this series. So guys, there you have it. That is the first episode of Inside the Mind. Absolutely massive thank you to Dan for coming on and being a fantastic first guest. Like I said, do drop a like on the video, comment, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and let me know down below if there are any changes you need or want me to make to the series, or are there any guests that you particularly want to see invited onto the channel. Until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.